One of the most beautiful constitutions in the entire world is that of North Korea. North Korea's constitution guarantees unbelievable rights to its citizens. It guarantees prosperity, it guarantees health, it guarantees their rights to freedom of assembly, to freedom of speech, to freedom of religion, and to nearly every other right. But as everyone knows, North Koreans don't have these rights. In fact, they have virtually no rights at all. The reason for this is simple. A government must actually enforce the rights it promotes in its constitution in order for that constitution to mean anything. This is an example of a story going on in America right now, where free speech, guaranteed in America's First Amendment, may be under fire. And the prompt we'll be looking at today is revoking student visas a violation of free speech? And to answer this question, we'll look at three separate points. We'll start by talking about ongoing visa revocals. Second, we'll talk about the reasoning behind this. And then third, we'll talk about whether or not this is in fact a violation of free speech. So let's start with some of the background around this issue. Why has there been visa revocal? Time magazine on August 19, 2025 reported that 6,000 student visas have been revoked, reported the Trump administration, since the beginning of Trump taking office 6 months before this article was written. 6,000 student visas have been revoked. And as Time magazine continued, the reasoning behind this, there were many different reasons behind this. Some of them were for violations of immigration laws, overstaying of visas, even minor offenses. And it also noted that 300 of these offenses were, quote, support for terrorism, unquote. The Immigration and Nationality Act apparently gives authority, at least according to this Time magazine article, to revoke student visas based on support for terrorism. And other news articles also back up this story. The Cato Institute on March 30, 2025 reported that this type of visa being revoked by the Trump administration is known as an F1 visa. And these F1 visas, the Trump administration's denial of these visas to foreign students has reached a record high. Now, this Cato Institute report notes, 41% of all visa applicants are denied. The Cato Institute continues saying that this increasing denial of student requests for visas will likely result in a total decrease in student applications. The Hill, on September 1st, 2025, reports that the Trump administration, some of the reasoning for this revocal of visas, is that many of these students whose visas are being revoked are connected to the Chinese Communist Party. So now that we have the background to the story, let's continue on to some of the reasoning, which we've already touched on in our first point. In our second point, we'll delve more into that. Again, we saw first that there was reasoning based on support for terrorism and support for the Chinese Communist Party. That Time magazine article also noted that there is support for the Free Palestine movement. What we see with all three of these movements, the Free Palestine movement, the Chinese Communist Party, and support for terrorism, is that all of them are working to undermine the U.S. form of government. None of these student groups are trying to contribute to a flourishing country. Instead, they want to harm the country in order to forward their own goals. So all these different groups do not have the interest of Americans or the protection of Americans' rights in mind. This is important to understand, given that if we want to protect free speech, obviously these student groups do not have free speech as a principle. If they believe in terrorism or support for the Chinese Communist Party, they are willing to look the other way and violate others' rights to free speech in order to promote their own goals. They are only using free speech effectively as a tool in order to achieve their own goals. They aren't trying to protect free speech. They're only trying to use it. So let's then move on to our third point. Is this revocal of student visas a violation of free speech? We can look to many political theorists over the past few centuries in order to answer this question. Edmund Burke, a conservative political theorist who wrote a book, Reflections on the Revolution in France, wrote, quote, "Liberty must be limited in order to be possessed," unquote. What he means by this is that if we are given an unlimited liberty, then that liberty has no meaning. If humans are given an unlimited right to do anything they want, then they can violate each other's rights to do whatever they want, and that right has no meaning. Right must be limited in order for it to achieve anything. If everyone has unlimited right to theft, then some people will in fact lose their right to thieving because others will steal their ability to do so. We see this in the principle of protecting free speech. To uphold free speech, there must, in fact, be a standard for what speech is acceptable. If speech aimed at destroying the very principle of free speech is allowed, free speech will decline. Now, if we want free speech to prosper, there must be some ban on speech against free speech. So, by looking at this ongoing visa revocal effort by the Trump administration, looking at the reasoning behind it, and questioning whether or not this is a violation of free speech, we can see that if the Trump administration is pulling these visas for the reasons given, support for the Chinese Communist Party and for terrorism, this is not a violation of free speech, because free speech must be limited in order for it to be free. Otherwise, if everyone has unlimited speech, they will use that to destroy the entire foundation of the society. Just like North Korea's constitution guaranteed amazing rights, didn't enforce them, the US must enforce its rights.